Stigma is something that lives between these two things, your ears. Like it's an internal emotional constraint that we place upon ourselves.
All right, everyone. Welcome to Stronger Weekly, brought to you by Purist Nutrition. I'm your host, Jesse Karajat. Thank you so much for being here this week. Happy December. Hope you had a great Thanksgiving holiday. We've got a great and important episode for you today. The topic is stigmatized health conditions, and specifically for men. So a stigmatized health condition is any health condition that has a stigma around it, and oftentimes people suffering with the health condition are reluctant to get the help that they need. So examples could be alcohol use disorder, erectile dysfunction, obesity, and you'll hear later in my conversation, even hearing loss can be a stigmatized health condition. And we've got a great guest to really unpack that topic. His name is Neil Walker. He's the Vice President of Growth for an organization called Oar Health. Oar Health helps people with alcohol use disorder. They have naltrexone, which is medication-assisted treatment to help people. Alcohol use disorder is a stigmatized health condition. And Neil is a marketer who has spent his entire career in this category of stigmatized health condition. And because of that, he really understands the psychology behind and beneath these conditions and kind of why people don't say yes to getting the help that they need. And he spent his whole career in this area. He's helped in those areas of erectile dysfunction and others. So he just has a lot to offer and so much wisdom around it. And really the hope with this particular topic in this conversation is that someone out there listening who maybe hasn't gotten the help that they should get will say yes and understand why that's important. So just a great conversation with Neil. I'm so grateful he joined the show. But before we jump into that, as we always do, we're going to kick off this episode with this week's health and fitness news. Let's jump in. All right. First up, big headline this week around prescription drug costs and Medicare. So the Trump administration has released the first set of negotiated prices for 15 high-cost prescription drugs covered by Medicare, including commonly used blood thinners and diabetes medications. On average, the new rates represent roughly a 40 to 45% discount off of historically listed prices and are projected to save the federal government billions of dollars over the next few years. Important context, these negotiations are not a brand new idea. They're happening under authority granted by the Inflation Reduction Act, which first allowed Medicare to negotiate directly with drug makers after decades of being barred from doing so. Supporters say this is a long overdue correction in a system where U.S. patients routinely pay some of the highest drug prices in the world. Critics, including some in the pharmaceutical industry, of course, still argue that aggressive price controls could eventually slow innovation. Age-old defense mechanism there. So Senate Finance Chair Ron Wyden has been blunt, saying that Trump's claim of, quote, delivering lower prices, quote, ignores the fact that his party previously tried to block or weaken this same law. At the same time, the administration is leaning into the political win, emphasizing that many Medicare enrollees on these drugs can expect to see lower out-of-pocket costs as the negotiated prices phase in. So this headline is simple. If you want to take away, Medicare is finally using its buying power, to push down prices on some of the most expensive drugs in America, and that shift is going to matter for seniors, especially ones on fixed incomes. Look, politics aside, I don't care. Prescription drugs are a problem in this country, and anything that can help them bring that down for anyone is a net positive. So I'm here for it. Next up, the 2025 World's Strongest Woman title has been revoked after sex eligibility disputes. So Jamie Booker, could be Jamie, looks like Jamie Booker, who recently won the World's Strongest Woman competition, has been stripped of her title after organizers said they learned she was in fact born a male and therefore is ineligible under their rules. The federation says the decision was made after reviewing birth records and cites policies intended, in their words, quote, to protect the integrity of women's competition. So Booker has publicly pushed back, saying she followed the rules as they were presented to her and feels the decision is discriminatory and unfair. The situation has exploded online, with some athletes and fans arguing this is necessary to maintain a level playing field based on biological sex, while others are warning that public, quote, outing and retroactive disqualification can fuel harassment and make the sport less welcoming for everyone. So whatever your position, this case shows how far behind sports organizations are in clearly defining and communicating eligibility rules. That's one. And how real human beings can get caught up in the middle when policy and culture collide. That's two. And number three, just to put my own personal opinion on it, this particular sport, strength training, just to protect fairness for those people born female, I do think it's appropriate. We can't have men outlifting women in these competitions. Your next headline, big science story, an interesting one this week on how the human brain changes across a lifetime. So a new analysis in Nature Communications used tens of thousands of brain scans to map what researchers are calling 5 distinct epochs of brain development from before birth through old age. They combine MRI imaging and genetic data to show how brain structure, connectivity, and gene activity shift in early childhood, adolescence, midlife, and beyond. So this is from NBC News. A summary notes that some regions tied to emotion and reward mature earlier, while areas involved in self-control and planning keep changing well into a person's 20s. Later in life, the study shows accelerated thinning and volume loss in regions linked to dementia and neurodegeneration. One of the authors said the work helps pinpoint, quote, windows of vulnerability and opportunity, time periods when the brain may be especially sensitive to stress, substance use, sleep, and lifestyle factors. Takeaway from this study and this report, the brain is not fully formed at 25 and then static. It's continuously remodeling itself across these 5 major life phases, which means the choices you make in each season of life really can shape long-term brain health. And I did actually read a part of this study that said even at 32 years old, you're not fully mature in terms of your brain development. So for some of the bad decisions I made up to 32, maybe I get a pass for it this time, but definitely interesting study. I encourage you to check it out. The brain's 5 epochs of development. Next up, fresh data this week on a question a lot of us are quietly asking ourselves. Does taking a break from social media actually help our mental health? Foreshadowing. Yes, it does. A randomized trial published in JAMA Network Open assigned adults either to continue their normal social media use or to take 1 week off platforms like Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. We could all use that. Compared with the control group, people who stepped away reported modest but measurable and noticeable reductions in depression and anxiety scores at the end of just 1 week from abstaining from those technologies. Some of those benefits persisted when researchers followed up several weeks later. So coverage from Euronews notes that the biggest improvements were seen in heavy users, in this case, heavy social media users, people spending multiple hours per day scrolling. The authors are careful to say this is not a cure for clinical depression, but it is a low-risk intervention that appears to be reliable and reduce negative mood for many users for quite some time. So in other words, the mental load of constant notifications, comparison, and otherwise things attached to social media, it does not come without an expense. So takeaway for everybody, if your screen time report makes you wince, simple 7-day detox or cleanse from social media is starting to look less like a gimmick and more like actual legitimate mental health care. And especially if you turn that reclaimed time into more sleep, meditation, movement, or real world connection. So put down your phone, folks. This last one, not really a headline, just one that I think is cool and practical. This comes from Men's Health, in which DJ Shipley, who's a really becoming quite a famous former Navy SEAL, now he's a coach, lays out 6 exercises every man needs for building lifelong strength. And I would say any man or woman. So he just gives like his tips and tools. And if you look at a picture of this guy, you're like, yes, let me do what you do. So the first one, trap bar deadlifts, not your conventional deadlift, but something lifting weight off the floor in a safe mechanical way. And that's what a trap bar can do. So trap bar deadlifts, number 1, strict pull-ups, good form, good range of motion, being able to pull your body weight up to a bar. Great exercise. Number 3, a lunge or a lunge variant, such as a Bulgarian split squat, walking lunge, reverse lunge, etc., which is basically great for mobility, range of motion, muscle stimulation, all those things. Farmer's carries. He actually says he takes his body weight, divides it in half, and holds each amount. So in my case, if I weigh 190 divided by 2, each amount in my hand, and be able to walk carrying my own body weight. So farmers carry, great for grip strength, which has great carryover benefits to other exercises you might be doing. Number 5, plyometrics, some things like box jumps, hops, pogo hops, jump rope, things like that. Plyometrics is good for elasticity in your muscles for longevity. And then finally, sprints. He recommends sprinting at least 2 times a week. It doesn't have to be for 15 minutes, just a couple long bouts, warm up, right? But sprints are great for longevity, speed, and all those things. So barreled through them on you, but I thought it was just a great article by a great fitness icon. So with that said, that is it for this week's health and fitness headlines. Just a quick word from our sponsor, Purist Nutrition, and then Neil Walker joins us on the other side. We'll see you there. All right, let's be honest. You're probably not a professional athlete with a personal chef and unlimited recovery time. If you're like me, you're hitting the gym at 5 a.m. before work or squeezing in training between meetings, just trying to stay consistent while life keeps throwing you curveballs. That's exactly who Purist Nutrition was made for. Purist keeps it simple. NSF certified supplements with minimal, clean ingredients that actually taste good. No artificial ingredients and no proprietary blends where you're guessing what you're taking. Just premium actives like Creapure, the purest creatine on the planet, whey isolate protein that is US sourced and easy on the stomach, and hydration that keeps you going without all the extra sugar or sodium. Whether you're a parent juggling kids and training or just someone who refuses to compromise on quality, Purist Nutrition fits your routine. Built for tomorrow, science-backed, tested and trusted by athletes, and most importantly, effective. Visit puristnutrition.com to see the full lineup of quality supplements. That's puristnutrition.com, because your nutrition should work as hard as you do. All right, everybody, I am here with Neil Walker. How you doing, Neil?
I'm good. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you. Happy Friday to you, the Friday before Thanksgiving. One of the things that I said to you when I asked you to come on the show, and thank you for saying yes, is one of the reasons you're here is because I just like your accent. Not the whole reason, but
fair enough. Yeah. I'll try to keep the Britishisms in, where relevant. Although I'm now an American, so, it's, I've definitely lost some of the edges to the accent and say words like trash and garbage.
there's something about, I don't know if this is an American thing as an American, but when I hear like British accents or Australian accents, you just sound smarter and cooler. Like you could be completely just BSing me on something and I would believe it because of the way you sound. I just love it.
Okay. Well, I'll try not to abuse that power.
Got it. Cool. Well, again, thank you so much for being here. I think this topic, and then context for the audience, I had heard you speak about this topic, which is stigmatized health conditions, right? And then particularly why it is that men tend to not seek the help that they might need, even if they know they need it, because of a stigma around whatever that condition is, right? So that's what we're going to kind of talk about. But before we do, if you could just in your own words, just give a little bit about your background and introduce yourself to the audience, that'd be great.
Sure. So I'm Neil Walker. I run growth marketing at Oar Health. Oar Health is a telehealth company that helps people find treatments on the internet for alcohol use disorder. That means I spend most of my day thinking about people who are facing that challenge and how they arrive at taking that first step to getting help. So stigma is top of my mind most of the time. Before Oar Health, I have a background, almost the last 10 years in other forms of stigmatized healthcare marketing. So anything from erectile dysfunction, hair loss, weight loss, premature ejaculation, hearing aids. You'd be surprised at how stigmatized hearing aids are. So that's my background. And so the idea of getting people over the line to get help for something that they desperately need is something I've spent a lot of gray matter thinking about.
Yeah. And marketing as a skill and a career is universal and it can be applied in so many different areas. How is it that you found yourself dedicating essentially a decade of your career in this stigmatized healthcare condition space?
So I think the first driver is it's there's a lot of personal satisfaction with helping people. When you change someone's life in this particular area, it is a little bit more profound than getting them on the right cell phone plan or, helping them choose the right pair of socks. When somebody's struggling with alcohol use disorder, many things downstream of that tend to either get broken or don't work the way they would like. And so, just solving that one problem in their life. When we read our reviews, I'm always blown away by what an impact it can have. And it's not just limited to alcohol use disorder. Erectile dysfunction and weight loss, hair loss, all of these things are very heavily linked to confidence, and you can really turn a person's life around. And then on the other hand, there's a big intellectual challenge. Stigma is something that lives between these two things, your ears. Like, it's an internal emotional constraint that we place upon ourselves. And so trying to find a way around that problem is pretty gratifying, especially when you get it right, because then you have actually helped somebody.
Yeah. That first point you made, Neil, the way I framed it, like you can kind of do marketing around anything, and you use cell phones as an example, but I guess I hadn't thought about how fulfilling it must be when you consider how high the stakes are if people don't get help for some of the issues they're facing. We use alcohol as an example, and you know this about me, you know my story, but I got to a point in my life where I just kind of saw the road ahead if I didn't do something, and I saw at least the hope for the potential road ahead if I did. And that road ahead, if I didn't get help, was dark and sad and scary and lonely and all the negative emotions, right? When I think about that, when I think about what you're doing now with Oar, it's like it must be so gratifying to know that your efforts, your career are dedicated to something that is truly going to change the outcome of someone's life potentially. I don't want to be too dramatic about it, but like you're changing their life in a way that their legacies are changed, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about your story, you follow the pattern that I think that we really set out to help with, which is helping someone way before they hit what is commonly referred to as rock bottom. There's a bit of a myth out there that somebody has to go through a great deal of pain, arrive at this so-called rock bottom, and only then can they seek help, only then can they change. Sure, if somebody has fallen further down the path, the path that you spoke about, we would love to help them if it's possible. But getting someone to pull up from that sooner is definitely a big win. And if we can say harm reduction is all about saving people from the worst possible consequences, and I think your story speaks to that.
Yeah. And on the stigma side of it, and again, just staying on alcohol use disorder for one more moment, I can remember first either sensing or knowing that I was struggling with alcohol, and I was resistant to do anything other than just kind of, willpower it away. Because for me, I guess admitting or even accepting that I was struggling with this felt like weakness. And I don't know, we can get into some other stigmatized conditions, but firsthand experience, I knew I had an issue. I knew it had to be addressed, but I was unwilling to be honest about it. And perhaps that gets into the stigmatized condition. But what would be your, kind of going backwards, what would be your, like the Neil Walker definition? It doesn't have to be like some clinical definition of a stigmatized condition. And then you started to give a list of some before, but can you give some other examples of conditions that maybe fit that category?
Yeah, I think stigma really comes down to two things. The most obvious is the external perception. So what other people think of the condition, what other people think of the person who's got it, and all the judgment that comes with it. Most of us know and could list the things that other people judge. And because of other people's judgment, that tends to hold people back, give them fear of judgment.
Mm-hmm.
That's a really powerful and obvious and big driver of stigma. There is another one, I think, from what I've heard of, from different people talking about this, and that's that internal, the internal driver. So, and I think you spoke about this just a moment ago, or you touched on it, and that's the who am I? Who do I see when I look in the mirror? And do I want to be, quote unquote, that guy? Do I
Right.
want do I want to admit that I have a problem in this area? The first time we encounter it, we probably think that problem is for other people. I'm not that. And it takes a moment for most people to realize that maybe they have a bigger problem than that they would like to admit. And that's all about internal perception.
Yeah. So in other words, there's external judgment and then internally self-judgment. Some words that came to mind, maybe shame, embarrassment, weakness, things like that.
Yeah.
That's a good way to look at it. So what are some of the kind of more, I don't know, say more popular, maybe more prevalent conditions that kind of fit this category? You mentioned hair loss, erectile dysfunction. I'm assuming maybe overeating, obesity, alcohol. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, I mean, if you just think about what are the things that society tends to shun and speak ill of, that's the list. I mean, what are the insults in the playground?
Mm,
Um, that's a very good place to start. These things have been stigmatized for so long. If you were to go back in time to Elizabethan England, you would find men would be insulting each other about hair loss and what they would then call impotence, we would now call erectile dysfunction. And if you go back to ancient Rome, there's graffiti mocking famous people in the forum for these very things. So the baggage is really incredible. So yeah, the ones that I've touched on: erectile dysfunction, premature ejaculation, hair loss, weight loss, alcohol use disorder, and then, as I said before, hearing loss, which is a surprisingly stigmatized condition. What I think is interesting is some of those are very obvious to people. So if you're losing your hair, that's something that people can see all the time.
yeah.
Erectile dysfunction is not showing up throughout your day. You don't go into a work setting with that quite so obvious. So some of these are more out in the open, and some of them are more um, held within. So yeah, I think there's a lot of nuance between them.
Yeah. I want to double click on erectile dysfunction for a moment. Because you spent some time working in that area, right? With that population.
Yeah, I was at Roman, yeah, known as Roe as well.
I mentioned offline right before we hit play that I think marketing is adjacent to psychology. Because if you're going to market effectively to a person, you have to understand them, what drives them, how they're feeling. And I think most importantly, how to get them to engage with whatever you're marketing, right? So that to ask back to Roman and erectile dysfunction, maybe, how would I ask this? Maybe if you could just kind of share what you learned about men that were suffering with that condition, because suffering would be the right word, right?
Sure.
What did you learn, and just kind of, share about your experiences with that particular condition, if you could.
Erectile dysfunction is the new word for it. Pfizer, who came up with ED medication, invented the term so that they could reframe the problem and get away from centuries-old term impotence. And if you think about how ugly a word that is, you can sort of understand why they wanted to create something that was more clinical sounding and further away from a playground insult. So by reframing the problem, it helped guys move towards it. How men feel when they have it. A good deal of men the research that we did at Roman pointed to the fact that men didn't want to let their partners down. And the ads that Z, our founder, who, if you remember the ads with the red background and Z in a black t-shirt talking about ED on camera, no Viagra ad had ever had someone being quite so earnest and honest about the problem. He would sort of talk about, hey, is it worse to have it or is it worse to talk about it? And, pose some like big questions. And I think, when men realized that there was a pretty simple solve for it, there's a reason why it's a billion-dollar industry and became one so quickly.
When you were thinking about how to reach those men, reach them is A, B is get them to engage. How did you go about kind of solving that puzzle?
So the messenger made a big difference. If you cast your mind back, Viagra and Cialis did try to use usually retired athletes. In our case, we lent on Z pretty hard because not many people are willing to talk about it on camera. And then we use a great deal of influencers on podcasters. That was a bit of a double-edged sword. I remember there was one time we worked with Conan O'Brien, uh, sponsoring Conan O'Brien's podcast, and he spent half the time telling everyone how he didn't have the problem before he talked about the solution to it. So, I mean, I think that speaks to just how uncomfortable the subject made people.
Or stigmatized it is, that.
Yeah, I mean, by telling everyone how he didn't have it, he didn't really help the cause of letting people know that it was okay and it was, not such a big deal to get treatment. So, the messenger really mattered. And the other thing was really trying to move away from the pill and the condition and trying to talk more about the after and the after. So better sex, and better sex would probably lead to a better, stronger relationship. The ad that we ran longest and most frequently was called Roman Ready. And it was the first time we put two people together on camera, in the throes of passion, but in the build up to the throes of passion. But we got pushback. I mean, we were told by certain TV networks, sorry, what happened to the guy in the white lab coat talking about the condition? This is a medical condition. So we were actively trying to move away from like the clinical problem and to frame it as you can have better sex. And we had one or two of the networks saying, sorry, we're not allowing that. So a challenge, but in the end, it was worth it.
Yeah. When I think about the messenger piece, because that was the first part of your answer. So the messenger, and I would even say the first part, even though it was Viagra that did it, but kind of changing the language around the condition itself to open up people to be open to actually exploring it a little bit. But then on the messenger piece, I think back to alcohol for a moment. When I set out on my journey to start the podcast, I'd say the first step was to help, get help for the alcohol situation. But to start the podcast, I don't think that I would have put it in the language you did because I didn't know how to. Mm-hmm. But what I recognized, I think intuitively, was back to kind of like darkness, right? I think some people who struggle with alcohol, they keep it in the dark. And they do that because what you mentioned earlier, that fear of judgment and that internal shame. I think if there are more people who are willing to be honest and come forward and say, I'm struggling with this thing, like as almost like messengers, I think that helps other people obviously say, oh, me too. And sorry for the little diatribe, but for me, what I tried to do initially when I came out and said, whoa, the feedback that I was getting externally from other people about my life, because they didn't know about the alcohol thing, was you've got it all together. You're successful, happy marriage, beautiful kids. This is what they said. I'm not saying this about myself, right? You look fit. Objectively speaking, your career is going upward, not backwards, right? That was what they saw because that's what I chose to present. But I knew that there was this other thing that I was struggling with. So back to the messenger piece, it resonates with me because what I was trying to do was come forward and say, hey, this guy you thought I was, I'm not that guy. And the second part is, this is a thing that I'm struggling with. And then the third part is, it's okay. It does not mean that you are weak or it does not mean you have a defect. It means this thing is hard. And then, of course, the fourth piece is, and you can do something about it. And I can see how having more and more messengers, the right messengers, can open up people to come forward and say, yes, I would like that outcome. I would like that future promise, which is fill in the blank from whatever the condition is, right?
So, yeah, I think finding the right messenger is incredibly powerful and incredibly difficult. And I think the two things go together. At Roman, we had our founder Z as our sort of first patient on screen talking about his problem. At Oar, we have our founder Jonathan on screen talking about his problem and how he solved it. Finding messenger number two, much more challenging.
Yeah.
It's not because people don't have this issue, but for the very reasons that it's powerful are the same reasons that people are more reticent to talk about it. I mean, you're a rare example of someone who is as open and honest as you are. There's quite a short list. With alcohol use disorder, though, there is a number of people who have solved the problem, but they only really want to talk about the way that they solved it. And some people can be a little dismissive of about other methods. So that's something that we encounter.
Sure. Yeah. If we could somewhat switch gears, only somewhat, but the topic of men, maybe versus women in terms of these conditions, I think my instinct is that men are less likely to get help when they need it, but that is just an instinct. I don't have statistics and I'm not asking you to have them either. But I guess I'll just ask, because you've been working in this space for so long, why is it that you, well, first off, affirm my instinct. Do you think men are less likely to get help for these types of conditions? And then maybe the second part, assuming you would affirm that, is why do you think that that is based on what you've experienced?
Sure. So we definitely saw that men were less likely to seek help. The two clearest examples of that are with hearing aids and with alcohol use disorder.
Really?
In both cases, men are more likely to have a problem, but less likely to seek help for it. So when I was at Audicus, our patient base was about 50-50, despite men being much more likely to have the problem. And then the same thing is true at Oar Health. Why are men less willing to tackle these problems? I think it's got less to do with the stigma. I think stigma stops everybody from tackling it. I think there's a separate issue here, which is, in general, men seem to be less willing to tackle healthcare problems. I believe there's data that says married men live longer, and the working hypothesis is it's because their spouses nudge them to seek out help for problems before they become too, more serious than they need be. So yeah, so why do men not seek help? I think we're pre-programmed to be independent, and not ask for help. It's the same reason that men don't ask for directions compared to.
Yeah. Guilty. Yep. Guilty.
We're a little stubborn.
I will, yeah, I've got the stubborn German in me. That's what my grandma used to say. Heard on that. I didn't know men statistically lived longer, though. I thought I was expecting to
married men compared to non-married men.
Tracking on that. I tell my wife all the time she's going to outlive me by 15 years. I've got all these processes and all of these like hacks and habits about my healthcare, but I'm running around stressed because of my schedule. And she just kind of goes through life, and she's going to be the one that at the end of the day kind of wins. If we could go back to, you gave a great example there with Roman, because I essentially asked you, how did you break through for that particular stigmatized condition? Can you just reflect on your career a little bit and just talk about other ways in which you've broken through the stigma or the guardedness of potential consumers to get them to engage with the services? Like just other stories or anything you learned. I think that was really, really helpful to listen to.
Yeah. So a big way to overcome stigma is reframing the situation away from the problem toward the outcome. So my favorite example of this was Roman had a product called Roman Swipes, which, if you're not familiar with it, is a little pouch you get, sort of almost like a wet wipe that you use to delay the onset of ejaculation. So on paper, that's a clinical treatment for premature ejaculation. It's non-prescription, it's over the counter, but that's still the clinical use. Never once did we say in the marketing that this was for premature ejaculation. We just didn't bring up the problem. What we talked about was Roman Swipes helps you last longer in bed, 4 times longer in bed. When guys heard that, it was pretty self-evident, what it was doing and why it was good. So they didn't need to hear the problem. They just hearing the solution was enough.
That's real fast. That's genius, because you're trusting that the quote unquote problem is implied if you just talk about the solution, right? And then you're potentially, I don't know why if this fits. Was that something that you could buy like at like a convenience store, or was that shipped directly to your house?
You could do both.
Okay, so first example, I'm just picturing myself walking in and picking up a product and thinking about it. And if it said like stop premature ejaculating, I don't know what it is, but I might just put that down and be like, oh, I don't want to touch that. However, if it said like, last for four, whatever you said, my guard would be down. And you didn't need that, affirmation there, but I can see how that would work. How did you figure that out? How did you decide to do that? I'm picturing you with a whiteboard with a marketing team trying to be like, hey, what should it say? How did you land on that as the answer to market it?
I think it was already part of the marketing material. And I think just it evolved to let's just stop saying the negative part out loud.
Right.
So we took that lesson and then we applied it back to ED, and we started running ads that packaged up erectile dysfunction medication, premature ejaculation swipes, and we just sort of talked about having better sex and the benefits of it without necessarily harping on about those particular conditions. It was just enough to get guys to stop what they were doing, open their ears, go check it out. Eventually on the website, it would maybe become a little bit more clear on the landing page or thereafter that
Mhm.
there was, what these medications, what these treatments were for. The first job is to get them to open their ears, listen, and think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. How about some other products or other areas? You mentioned hearing loss, and I'm still just kind of scratching my head that men are less likely to get help for hearing loss, but how'd you crack that code?
Out of all the conditions we've talked about, hearing loss is maybe the most stigmatized.
Really?
The average person takes 7 years to go from first starting to realize they have hearing loss to tackling it. And there's several layers of denial on this journey. First, there's, I don't have a problem. And then the problem tends to grow. So the problem then becomes acute enough that they realize they have a problem because, they're getting feedback from other people in their lives. And eventually it becomes hard to ignore. They then start saying, and we heard this out loud, lots of times, I know I have a problem, but I'm not ready for the solution. So a fundamentally difficult challenge because there was a lot of internal issues. They didn't want to admit to themselves that they were old enough
Mm.
that hearing aids were something they needed. Although, I saw this in my, my own life. My father, he walked with a cane before he would wear hearing aids. So if you think,
Mm.
if you think about like the the image of an older person, I mean, if you were going to draw one, you would probably draw an older person with a cane. He was more willing to accept that than he was hearing aids.
Mm.
I think there was something about the fact that they were big and bulky and beige, or at least they were in the past. I think the fact that they could get a little gunked up. The ear is actually a fairly unpleasant place and does not treat electronics well. But there was just something about it, and I'm not sure we ever 100% cracked the code on it. When I think about glasses
Mhm.
and the journey they've been on, and they used to be pretty uncool, and now they're pretty cool and sexy. I was I was kind of hoping that hearing aids would go through that renaissance. Whilst I was working in the field, Apple brought out their AirPods for the first time. And so you started seeing people with little things in their ear all the time on TV and young and cool people. So I was like, oh, this is going to get people over the hump. And it didn't seem to make much of a difference. So yeah, I don't know. I don't know if I ever cracked that code, if I'm honest.
Yeah. Well, I'm just not to go too deep on it, but it maybe in some way hearing aids versus a cane is emblematic of aging, which deeper mortality, and then deeper underneath that, it's like a fear of accepting that this is where we're heading, right? I don't know if that's too deep, but I see that. I can see that point. But like, I can accept walking around with a cane, but like once I put these on, that might be the end. You know what I mean? I don't know. Maybe I'm going too deep with it.
Yeah, yeah, maybe. So that could be it. The other factor was with a cane, there's really not a workaround. With glasses, there's not really a workaround. With hearing aids, we found that people were incredibly good at workarounds. So we're recording this the week before Thanksgiving. Stories we would hear is, oh, it's Thanksgiving. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to have my favorite niece and my son sit either side of me so that I know who I'm going to talk to. My dad reprogrammed our TV to boost the treble. So I went home one year or one Christmas and I turned on the TV and the treble was off the charts because he knew what his problem was, because hearing loss tends to hit the high notes first. So, being an engineer, he just made the TV into his own personal hearing aid. But then still swore blind that he didn't need them.
To the Thanksgiving thing, maybe there's some benefits to hearing loss, right? Maybe if you just want to, claim that you can't hear because you don't want to talk to a family member or something, maybe there's some benefits there as well. I don't know. Hey, I don't normally do this, but I'm looking at some of the notes, pre-recording here, and you call out an experience with Barstool Sports. Would you mind talking about that a little bit? I'm curious.
So when we talk about the deep-seated, potent baggage with the language, impotence, ugly word, hair loss, they've been around for a long time. Reframing the challenge, speaking a more scientific language, something that has got no playground usage, low T, testosterone. Men, so Roman had a long-running sponsorship on Barstool Sports. And on the whole, the hosts of those podcasts were good sports, but they did not love talking about ED. They did not love talking about hair loss. But then we told them, oh, we're going to be launching something that's going to help guys with testosterone. And they were so pumped. They were so excited. They could not wait to talk about low T. At first I was, why? What exactly?
Yeah,
why? These two things are linked. Why is it one is, uncomfortable and stigmatized and the other one is like kind of cool? Like, oh, dude, I have literally, they would chat about, dude, I have low T and I'm going to get it treated.
I get it, but I don't get it.
Right.
Did you figure that out? Did you crack that code?
I think it goes back to the history. Low T has no baggage. It's brand new. So no one's ever teased anybody about it in the playground.
Right.
And so guys, like, no stigma. So essentially the same subject matter, absent stigma. We hadn't launched it yet, and they were starting to try and put it into their podcast, and we were like, "Whoa, you have to slow your roll. We're not ready yet."
I think that rings true for me. I just kind of reflect on my friends, and I feel like that topic comes up, and guys aren't afraid to just say, "Oh, I went to the doctor, I got my blood work, and I'm low T." Yeah. And perhaps it's because, there's no stigma around it. Maybe it's just perceived as, hey, this is just a genetic thing, or maybe it's my lifestyle, like, high stress, low sleep. And it does seem to be something that people are very much more willing to talk about versus, say, an ED, which kind of implies, I don't know, I don't know if I want to go this route, but maybe ED is more connected to like, it's emasculating to say that, or maybe that's the stigma versus low T. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud here, Neil.
Low T is the cause. Potentially ED is the outcome. Maybe there's a feeling that ED is me and low T is this like invisible scientific force inside my body that I have no control over.
Right.
And so I can blame myself for one, but I'm not going to blame myself for the other.
That's the psychology. See?
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Let's be honest, most of us don't have a private gym, a full-time trainer, or hours every day to lift. If you're like me, you don't even have time to commute to a local gym. You're training early in the morning or carving out 40 minutes between work, kids, and everything else competing for your time. And when fitness matters that much to your well-being and your health, you've got to have home fitness equipment that's as strong and reliable as you are. That is exactly why I use Rep Fitness. Rep is built for people who train with purpose, people who need high-quality, reliable equipment engineered for real strength. Designed right here in Colorado, USA, Rep Fitness provides racks, benches, bars, and plates that offer commercial-grade durability without commercial gym prices. Premium materials, smart engineering, and fair pricing. Whether you're outfitting your very first garage gym or upgrading your current setup to match where you want to go with your training, Rep makes gear that keeps up with your life and your goals. Visit repfitness.com to see their full lineup. Racks, benches, bars, plates, conditioning tools, and everything you need to build a home gym that works as hard as you do. That's repfitness.com. It's finally time to pursue your strength.
Let's, if it's okay with you, let's
Sure.
transition to alcohol use disorder, where you find yourself now in your career. We've already touched on it a little bit, but can you just, maybe we'll start with this. What have you learned? What have you learned about specifically people that are suffering, because it is a suffering with alcohol use disorder? Maybe just to throw some thought-provoking things out, like how are those people maybe a little bit different? I'm sure there's comorbidities with certain areas, but just kind of unpack, what you've learned about it. And then I also want to talk about the particular solution that you and your organization have. But let's just start with kind of like generalities, if you could.
Sure. So alcohol use disorder is pretty clear. The big driver of it is stress.
Yeah.
Relationship stress, work stress. Both of those are clear causes. It's pretty remarkable. Our median member age, so we've treated 65,000 people. So our data set is actually pretty robust. The median and mean age are both 43 years old.
Wow.
So if you were to map the U-shaped curve of unhappiness or the U-shaped curve of happiness, which is, if you Google it, you'll see the graphs. You start off your life happy and, your whole life's in front of you. Then as life gets a little more challenging, you get responsibilities, you tend to get a little less happy. And then as you get older, you get happier again. 43 is right at the bottom of that. And what is the driver of that unhappiness? Stress. You may have young children and aging parents. You're hitting that second or third gear in your career. Maybe you're a middle manager. You've got a mortgage to pay for, perhaps, all the things that make you need or want release. You've talked about this a great deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Real fast, I want you to keep going. Please keep that thought. But what's so interesting about that is those sources of stress are the very things that we seek. More responsibilities, right? Kids, family. Isn't that kind of interesting that the source of the stress is also in some sense kind of like the goal? It's just fascinating, but keep going. Sorry.
Yeah. So stress, huge driver. We find that mid-age, I'm 44, so my age is the peak. So that's one major thing we've learned. Another thing we've learned is people's willingness to take a leap. It's not a straight line down to rock bottom. People ebb and flow in their desire to change their situation. We found pretty strong pattern that the day after a major drinking event is likely a day when people are going to more likely to take a big leap. So Monday morning, the day after a big drinking holiday. So the day after Halloween. We've got Thanksgiving coming up. So Black Friday, as well as being a day for buying discounted stuff on the internet. There'll be some people nursing a hangover and unhappy with how things have gone in the prior day. So those are the sort of the big moments. But then if a day or two passes and they don't take action, then potentially that's, that moment passes, and then you have to sort of wait for the next opportunity.
Essentially, it's like a window of opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just funny. This is context to say something, and I might edit this out if it takes too long, but I'm joining a new church, and I play the drums, and I put my name in to potentially serve on that team. And the worship director sent me an email and said, "Hey, I want you to like record these 3 songs and do all these things and blah 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 blah." And I said, "Look, man, I don't want to use the B word, but I'm busy. I've got essentially 2 jobs, 3 kids, a lot going on. I'm hosting Thanksgiving. I'm not doing that." And I said, "However, 6 years ago, when I was in New Jersey, I was in a similar situation. I was joining a new church, and someone asked me to record a video. So I said, I'm happy to send you that, right? And if this means I'm disqualified to join in the team, so be it. It's not meant to be." So anyway, I had to go through my phone and scroll back to 6 years ago to try to find this recording. And I got distracted because of where this video was and the other videos around it. Because let's face it, who goes back in their phone and just looks at videos from 6 years ago? And what I saw was myself on camera in multiple videos with my family. At this time, I had just one baby girl. She was a year old instead of 3, 2 jobs, etc. And what jumped out to me and hit me was that is a different guy that I'm looking at in that video. The lightness, the goofiness, the jokiness, the time, like I just felt like a different person. So here I was with this project of I'm going to find this stupid video and attach it and be on with it. And then I got lost in this like reflective moment of like, why was I different? What was different? And when I really thought about it, I didn't have to think hard. I had less stress in my life. And what's interesting is if you take that moment 6 years ago, because I did this, I just kind of watched myself progress into this season that was very known to me, which was I can look exactly like that's when I started leaning on alcohol. Like I could see it. And then what happened was there was less videos in my phone of me dancing after dinner time, of doing all these goofy things. It was a different person. I was 36 years old, 35 years old at that time. So just to pull an anecdote out for you, your research is spot on bullseye for me, because what else was happening at that time? We were going from 1 kid to 2. I had just got promoted. I was traveling a lot. We had a bigger mortgage. We had all these responsibilities, which again, were supposed to be the goal, but it wound up stressing me out. And because I used alcohol and it's stigmatized, it took me 3 years, Neil, 3 years using alcohol as a crutch, as a coping tool for me. And as you know, the problem is it works initially, but then it snowballs and then it becomes more of a problem. But that all that to say, spot on that it was stress. In hindsight, being 2020, it was stress. And I didn't see it. I didn't see it for what it was.
Yeah, hindsight is definitely 2020. That's so interesting. And so when you look back on it, was there a particular leap, or was it sort of a more smooth decline?
In the sense of to get to a healthier place?
Well, both the problem and then I guess what was the day when you decided enough is enough? Or perhaps there were multiple days and it took you.
You know what it was? It was back to you said something earlier in our discussion here about like you could see somebody and kind of judge, these are my words, not yours, and even think like, but that's not me. And then you have this like look in the mirror moment where like, oh wait, it is, right? For me, it was without even making the decision to do it, it was hiding alcohol in my garage,
Right.
And being dishonest to my spouse. And it was like a moth to a flame at a certain time every day, walking out in the garage. And it was just one time when I lifted up the recycling. We have out here in Colorado with these massive recycling things. And I went and I lifted up the recycling thing, and I had just chugged like an 8% IPA, which I had hid in the back of the fridge behind groceries. And I had opened the top of the garbage can and with my hands moved dirty trash out of the way to throw it in the garbage can so I could put the dirty trash back over it. And I was doing that because I didn't want my wife to see it. And for me, it was enough of like a wake up call that like, it's one thing to hide it, but it's another thing to actively deceive. And it was just this feeling of like, who am I becoming? Not necessarily who have I become, but who am I becoming? And then where does this go from here? And you know this from my story, Neil, but to me, kind of compounding the impact of that moment was that I lost my father to drugs, and I essentially lost my stepfather, who replaced him when I was a teenager, to complications related to alcohol use disorder. So the fact that here I was essentially on this path of repeating some of the devastation that I had personally witnessed as a son, I just had this kind of pull up moment where I was like, can't do this, cannot do it. So that's, sorry for the long version there, but so I guess it was a kind of a sudden thing, but the problem had been trailing me for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's a story we see a great deal. So, we have hundreds and hundreds of people posting their experience online, and I think we've had over 8,000 people give us their story in either short or long form. So yeah, there are definitely patterns, and that is definitely one of them. The hiding alcohol and not wanting the spouse to know about it. Big one.
Yeah. Deceit, essentially, Let's talk a little bit about solutions, plural, and then singular naltrexone, medication assisted treatment I want to talk about. But maybe like just like the whole picture of like some of the places people turn to try to get that help. We know there's Alcoholics Anonymous is out there. There's different things, but what have you learned about maybe some of the routes or the paths people take before they eventually try, in this case, Oar Health?
So at least half the people who come to us have never tried any formal alternative pathway. Many people come to us because it's just we've made it as easy as possible to get help. And that's by design. We want to make it easy to get help. I don't think we're saying we're the only way they can get help, or that this is the last help they'll ever need. But we believe taking a first step is really valuable. And so that's a big part of our mission and our philosophy. The other routes that are super common, evidence-based, so direct therapy, mutual group support, so AA is included in that, in-person treatment, so you would probably refer to that as rehab, but it can be overnight, it can be day, there's detox centers, and then medication. Those are sort of the bigger ones. And the good thing about the medication route, certainly from our perspective, is that it can stack and combine. So you could do therapy and medication. You could, if you chose, go to rehab, and some rehab facilities will do this, and then take medication afterwards. One of the stories we've heard is that when someone comes home from rehab, they were doing great for however long it was that they were there, and when they get home, suddenly everything changes. So taking a step back, what does alcohol do in the body? Alcohol is not an opioid, but it produces an opioid-like response. That's the buzz that you get. Anticipation of that, it has been explained to me. I'm not a doctor, so I'm sharing what I've learned. Anticipation of the buzz can lead to a buzz, or put another way, that's what fuels the cravings, probably the easiest word. So if you've decided not to drink, and it's now, it's literally coming up at 5 p.m. on a Friday, right this second. 5 p.m. on a Friday for a lot of people is a hard moment, because that's a time when you were very likely to have a drink. And so all that anticipation. So if you've come home from rehab, you're now back in your normal environment. And so all the things that make you think about alcohol actually create the cravings.
Right. Yeah. I'm not a scientist either, but it's my show. I can say what I want. I'll say the word neural pathways. Those things are paved, and that familiarity can trigger the same type of feeling. I'm thinking like, I just looked at my calendar. I have a we're going to meet up with some families at a brewery in Colorado, right? 4 o'clock. In a prior life, the drive to the brewery itself is almost a buzz because you're anticipating that release of the dopamine that you experience, right? So I completely get it. But can you stay on that? And I know you're not a scientist per se, but the medication assisted treatment, perhaps I erred here. I probably should have led with what is it, right? But maybe just a little like your own overview of medication assisted treatment and then a little bit about why it's effective. Because I know it's effective because I take it, but why don't you just kind of lay that out a little bit? Because I have a couple more questions about alcohol
Sure.
specifically.
So the FDA has approved 3 different medications to treat alcohol use disorder. So they are on label indicated. The one that we most commonly prescribe is naltrexone. Naltrexone is the medication that our founder, Jonathan, that's the path that he took to get beyond his problem. And the way that naltrexone works is that it's an opioid antagonist. So it blocks the opioid receptors in the brain. So if you putting it in sort of how I would explain it to friends is if you have a drink, you don't feel that pull to have a second or third or fourth. So it stops that craving to keep drinking. And if you haven't had a drink yet, but you are feeling the urge, it's also good at blocking that feeling. So it's proven in the literature to reduce drinking days, reduce drinking volume, reduce binge drinking.
Yeah. And it took me when I decided that I needed to get help for my problem. It took me some time to discover medication assisted treatment as an option. I didn't know about it growing up. Why do you think it is? And I think it's gaining some traction now, but why do you think it is it's taken so long for people to become aware that this is an effective option?
It's definitely underutilized. A year ago, less than 2% of people with AUD use medication to treat it. That's risen in the last year to 2.5%. So a big increase on a very small base. So it is starting to gain some traction. The reason why medication is underknown, underutilized is complicated. If you would like to know more, there's a documentary coming out called Antagonist. The journalist has written for the New York Times. He wrote Fentanyl Inc. He sort of tackled this in great detail. So I'm not. I'll leave it to him to explain the great detail.
He's supposed to come on. He's coming on the show, by the way, just so you know. Thanks
Ben
to you.
Westhoff is coming on your show. Great.
Yeah.
So you're way ahead of the game.
Well, my audience is not. So go ahead, continue.
Okay. So I mean, what I'll say simply is, specifically when it comes to naltrexone, it was discovered as a molecule in the 1960s. It wasn't until the mid-90s that people realized that it could help with alcohol use disorder. It got its FDA approval in 1994. So by the time it became recognized as being effective in that area, it was already starting to cycle off of its patent. So there's never been a great deal of incentive for anybody to market it, and until recently.
Financial upside when you say incentive, like people couldn't make money off of it, so they didn't pursue it.
Financial incentive, yeah.
That sucks. Go ahead.
So, I mean, there are other reasons. I will leave it to Ben because there's some accusations in his documentary, but I think it's without question underutilized and not known about. It's surprising how few primary care practitioners even know about it, or if they've heard about it, they've heard negative things. It's just underprescribed.
Yeah. And that's a shame. And that's why I'm so grateful for the work that you and Jonathan are doing to put it on the map. And I'm so grateful that you're having so much success with it. The people that come to Oar Health and the people that are seeking this medication, what are they seeking? Are they seeking complete sobriety? Are they seeking moderation? Kind of unpack that a little bit.
70% of the people who come to Oar Health do so with the goal of moderation. I believe that is a reasonably common split. So 30% want to stop drinking altogether. 70% would like to gain control, but don't necessarily want to stop. I think there's a group of people who start taking the medication, have success with it, and then just drink less and less. And some of them, even though they didn't intend to stop, do end up stopping. That isn't their ongoing goal. And I think that's important because we know from the research that telling people that sobriety is the only answer will stop some people from taking a first step. There's also research to suggest that moderation and sobriety are equally successful goals when looked at in totality. So we believe, Oar Health believes strongly in meeting people where they are and not offering judgment. So if you come to us and you feel like you want to regain control over alcohol and you would like some help doing it, that is completely and utterly, totally fine. And I think if I'm not wrong, that's basically your journey.
That's right. That's 100% my journey. And philosophically, are you and founder Jonathan, like if someone comes and they say, I just want help with this, I don't want to drink for a certain amount of time. And if they come, they try the medication and they're successful, and then they get to a place where they're comfortable to kind of go at it alone and stop taking the medication, do you guys high five and say, hey, that's a win. We're so happy to have helped you. Come back if you need us. Is that kind of the philosophy there?
So the clinical guidance is to take the medication for at least a year.
Mm-hmm.
If people don't need it after that, well, I'm not a doctor, so I don't know if I could speak to that particular element. I will tell you this. We know that people join Oar Health, get success, and then they will leave. And then we have a meaningful group of people who come back. And I can also tell you, Jonathan has been on the medication. He's public. Jonathan's been on the medication for 8 years at this point, and he has told me and talked about publicly how there were times when he thought that he was past the problem, and then he felt the old urges come back, and so he retook it. Everybody's journey is different, so it's not really for me, certainly not for me to say, but that's the data that I've seen.
Yeah. All right. So Neil, I know from firsthand experience that with naltrexone medication assisted treatment, there are essentially two different ways, or mainly two different ways that folks take the medication to get the help they need, right? You have the daily method, which is when I started with naltrexone, that's what I did. And then you have this other method, which is Sinclair method. Daily method, self-explanatory. You take a similar dosage every day. Sinclair method, just by the name, not as obvious what it is. So can you kind of unpack the difference between those two different methods?
Sure. So naltrexone is prescribed by our clinicians for daily use, which means taking it every day. The guidance from them is to take it at the same time, usually with a meal, with a glass of water, like you do with many medications. There is a growing movement of quite passionate people who believe that there's an alternative way. Some people call it the Sinclair method. Others refer to it as targeted use.
Okay.
So from speaking to those communities and hearing them out, there's not even 100% agreement, but targeted usually means they want to take the medication close to a drinking occasion. So let's say the common guidance is an hour before. Some of those people don't take the medication on days that they don't drink. So, and I believe that's what you do. As I said, we believe in meeting people where they are. And so if that's what it's going to take for them to get excited and take the leap and adhere to the medication, then I think we believe that's a good thing. The data we have seen so we ask people when they join, what are your goals? And then we do a check-in and go, how's it going? And one of the questions we ask is, how often are you taking the medication? So that's an adherence question. And one of the answers they can give us is, not how often, but am I taking it in a targeted way? Are they doing the Sinclair method? When we then look at the outcomes for those folks, the data that we have seen internally is the outcomes for Sinclair method are as good as the people who take it daily on a regular basis.
Wow.
I don't know if the Sinclair method is better or if just the people who are taking it are more excited and are more bought in. There's quite a big community around the Sinclair method. Claudia Christian, who I believe has been a guest on your podcast.
She's been on the show. Yeah.
Yeah. So she did a great TED talk about it a few years ago. There's been a book about it. There are some very potent online communities on Discord that talk about it and help each other out. So when someone's looking for help and they stumble across this as a method, there's so many people saying how great it is. And I've heard you talk about how great you found it, that they go into it like with, gusto. And so, yeah, a big driver of success is the approach that you take and how you show up.
Yeah. Well, it's the middle door, right? I mean, when it comes to alcohol, if you're struggling, you have one door, which is keep doing what you're doing, which to me is you can't do that. And then the other one is typically complete sobriety, which is great for some people, but I think it opens up a middle door for people to try, especially if you could use that extra help, right? To make sure you don't overdo it. And you mentioned the book. Shout out to Katie Herzog. She's also been on the show, Drink Your Way Sober. She's a big advocate and proponent of the targeted method, which I will now call it instead. And that brings me to my last question for you, Neil, because I know that you're excited, because I'm excited too, but you're excited about a new evolution or a new season of Oar Health around the targeted method, I would say, which is Clutch, which is a new product that's coming out. Talk a little bit about that. What is Clutch, and why are you so excited about it? What do you think it's going to do?
Yeah, we have genuinely been trying to listen to our member base. And as I said, there's a big group of folks who are excited about targeted use. So Clutch is a compounded medication with the active ingredient is naltrexone. So to be clear, it's not FDA approved, it's compounded medication, but it's made in pharmacies by US licensed pharmacists. So it's a legitimate route to market. Clutch is a fast dissolving sublingual version or format. So it dissolves under your tongue. And so it enters, it dissolves really quickly. So it's designed to enter the bloodstream sooner. It's designed to go past the GI tract. So the intention is it acts quicker. And the intention is that you can take a lower dose and hopefully have fewer side effects. We're working on proving that. But we could definitely say that Clutch is an exciting option because it is discreet. The form factor of a mint means that if you were going to take it out in public, it's less likely to attract attention. I believe you found something along those lines.
Oh, 100%. I'll put it in my own words. I love it because it comes in this blue box that looks essentially like a pack of mints or gum. I bring it around in my fanny pack. Yes, I have one. Don't judge me. And I just throw it in there with all my other stuff. And what I like about it is there are times when spontaneously I'll get invited to go do something, go have a beer, or my wife will say, "Hey, I want to go to a winery tonight," whatever. And it's just with me. It just travels with me. And then if I decide that I'm going to have a drink or maybe two, I'll just literally pop one on the drive over there. And it works. And I can just kind of socialize without that like kind of voice in the back of my mind that says, "Jesse, don't overdo it. Don't overdo it." Because the voice is gone. So it just works. So I think it's genius. I've told you that before. And I was grateful because you shipped it to me early on when you were kind of testing it out. And I told you from the start, and I'll tell you here on the air, like, I love it. I think it's great. I really do.
Yeah. So there's been very little innovation in this area for the same reason that it's not being widely marketed. There's not been a great deal of education. There's been no financial investment into this area, or at least not for some time. So yeah, Clutch is designed to meet people where they are and offer them something that will help them actually take the medication in a way that they want to take it and that they themselves find effective.
Yeah. and going way back to the kind of setup for this episode about stigmas, right? There is something about it in the way that it's packaged and the way that you're talking about it and the way that I take it. There is something about it that when I've taken it that feels lighter and different than other types of medication that I've taken. So I think it destigmatizes it somewhat. That's my own opinion there for sure.
Well, we learn from the ED market. So Hims and Hers did an ED mint, and then Roe followed up with a gummy by making it not a clinical looking object. So it's not a pill. We talked before about reframing the language, reframing the problem. If you can reframe the form factor, it moves it out of the sort of the old modality of, oh, it's medication and it's clinical and it feels heavy, to something that doesn't feel like a big deal. And so people are more willing to accept it.
Yeah, I'm just throwing in a mint. That's all I'm doing. Just throwing in a mint and going to the brewery, right? So well done with that. I'm excited. And Clutch is live now. People can get access to it?
Yeah, so it's on our site. You go to the website, and as you go through the flow, it's an option. So you can choose the classic formulation, which is the FDA-approved tablet, or you can choose the compounded formulation, which is Clutch. The doctor will make the final decision, but your needs and preferences are a major, major driver of that.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, look, this was an awesome conversation, Neil. I hope anyone listening learned a lot about stigmatized health conditions, right? Asking the right questions of themselves. Am I not getting the help that I needed? So I hope that was helpful. And I particularly hope the alcohol piece was helpful. With that said, Neil, how would you, or where would you direct anyone listening to, first and foremost, maybe find and follow you? I know you're on LinkedIn and you're a great thinker in the world of marketing and marketing psychology, but also Oar Health, if they want to take that step, as you put it, to engage with Oar Health to maybe get the help that they need. Where would you send people?
Well, you can just Google Oar Health, or you can come to our website, www.oarhealth.com. Either works. If you want to hear people's stories, we have them on our website, or you can look in Trustpilot for a more third-party way to see how the medication works. There's also forums on Reddit talking about it.
Well, look, I know it's Friday for both of us. You're in Brooklyn and I'm in Northern Colorado, and we're both hosting more than 20 people for Thanksgiving next week, man. But I hope you have a great weekend, and thank you so much for joining the Stronger Weekly podcast, Neil. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Jesse. Real pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Look, if you're like me, you enjoy a drink every now and then. A glass of wine with dinner, a cold beer after a long week, maybe even a night out with friends. But you want to stay in control. That's why I'm excited about Clutch, the newest innovation from Oar Health. Clutch is a fast-acting naltrexone mint you take before you drink. It dissolves quickly, absorbs through your mouth, and starts working fast, helping you curb the cravings without giving up drinking altogether. It's discreet, portable, and designed for real life. The mints come in a sleek, pocket-sized case that goes wherever you go. If you've been trying to moderate or simply drink smarter, this is the tool that you need. To get started, text STRENGTH to 710-710. That's STRENGTH to 710-710. Answer a few quick questions, and your Clutch will be shipped directly to your door. No more hangovers, no more guilt, just the control you need in the palm of your hand. Bulletproof your drinking with Clutch now. All right, everybody, that's it for my conversation with Neil Walker. So grateful to have him on the show. First and foremost, such a cool guy. I meant what I said when the interview started. He's got an awesome accent. So as a baseline, awesome guy to chat with, but so smart. And I think more importantly, I've known Neil now just in being partnership with Oar Health. And I know Jonathan too, the founder. Such good guys. And they've got a heart and like a real passion for helping people with that particular stigmatized health condition, right? Alcohol use disorder. So I'm so glad he joined the show because he's just got so much experience around kind of breaking through to people to encourage them to get the help that they need. So I hope that you found that conversation enlightening, and I hope you found the health and fitness headlines helpful. Just my 5 takeaways from the conversation with Neil. 1, stigmas typically develop based on external judgment, perceived external judgment, and even internal judgment of ourselves, things like shame and whatnot. It's a good way to kind of ask yourself if you're hiding something that's stigmatized. Number 2,
men are more likely to be impacted by many stigmatized health conditions, but then also less likely to get help, which is not a good combination. Number 3, when it comes to messaging to people to get the help or to encourage them to get the help they need, it's important to focus on the outcome, not the problem. And that can be applied in our personal relationships. If we know someone who's struggling, try to paint the picture of what it looks like to be healthier, not focus on what the problem is as it stands. I thought that was really helpful. A big one, I think, a huge takeaway, number 4 for me, was that based on Neil and his team's data, stress is often the most common driver of alcohol use disorder. He talked about the happiness curve and how typically around 40s, mid 40s, that's when most people's happiness kind of decreases because of responsibilities and stress. And then sometimes they turn to alcohol. I thought that was fascinating. And then lastly, takeaway for anyone listening, I hope you're getting this, but when it comes to recovery from any condition, but alcohol being one of them, there are multiple pathways, of which medication is definitely a viable, effective one. And if you haven't tried it and you're looking for help, it's definitely something you should try. But because it can be combined with other modalities or other pathways, things like therapy and group therapy, things like that, it's flexible and it's helpful for everybody. So those are my 5 takeaways from my conversation with Neil. With that said, if you are still here, or since you're still here, I always like to ask if you could just take one more little effort, move your thumbs around. If you could find that ratings button and give us a great rating, I'd really appreciate that. If you did not like the conversation, please do not do that. You could also leave a comment. You can ask a question in the reviews. You can tell a friend if you think this episode could help them. Greatly appreciated. It helps other people find the show. And if you have a specific question and you want to engage with us, we have an email. It's contact@strongerweekly.com. You can send us an email. We monitor that. You could also ask a question that could wind up on our Ask Us Anything episode that we do every so often. We like to hear from our fans and listeners and engage and respond wherever we can. So with all of that said, thank you so much for joining the podcast this week. If you're listening before Thanksgiving, I hope you have an amazing holiday. I hope you're grateful for all the blessings in your life and you can look around and think, you know what? I'm thankful for all this. So that's it for the show, folks. We hope you grew stronger this week and we'll see you next time.